All right, welcome to the Helm Public Dev Stand-Up. Today is Thursday, March 22nd. And if you're not familiar with the format of this meeting, the core maintainers go around the room from both the charts and Helm repository side and bring us up to date on what they've been working on, what they plan on working on. And then at the end of that, we have an open time to discuss the things we need to discuss. Do we have any topics that we know for sure we're talking about today?
I know Josh put something that he wanted to add to the agenda.
Yeah, I haven't looked at the actual agenda. I just got done writing up, expanding on the Helm push stuff. So
good. Okay, so we'll talk about that at the end and anything else.
You wanted to do a demo this week too, right?
I would love to do a demo if we have the time, but all things considered.
All right. Nick, you want to kick us off and start the stand-up circle?
Sure, sounds good. So last week had a little bit of time to do some PRs and also spent a little bit of time moving Chart Museum to DEP. So this week I want to spend a little bit more time on the authentication pieces. I haven't had a chance to do that. For especially some of the OAuth stuff to iron that out and what that would look like for Chart Museum. So we'll work a bit more with Josh this week. So I will pass it on to Adam.
Yeah, so this week finished cleaning up that 1.10 pull request. So it needs testers. So if anybody got spare cycles, go ahead and give it a spin and just put it on there. It's good. If you ever ran into any issues with it. Then the other thing is just been playing around with some Helm 3 stuff. Just trying to spike on a few things, prototype some stuff to see how some of the folks feels. So, Fisher.
Adam, just out of curiosity, have you manually tested the 1.10 PR with like the 1.10 RC1 and with 194, or what's the test matrix you've done so far?
I have with 194. I haven't on my cluster yet.
Okay, that's good to know. So last week and the week before, I was kind of trying to push through the JFrog remote authentication support for repositories PR. Got that one through. And then I code reviewed Adam's 1.10 PR, but I haven't done a manual test. So either today or tomorrow, I'd like to do a manual test just to make sure that everything runs as nicely and smoothly. That is about it from the Helm side. It's just mostly issue triage after that. Nothing that I need to dribble on about. Go Taylor.
Sorry, mute button problems. Okay, so this week was a bit busy for me, so I didn't get around to too much. I tied up some PRs. I needed to double check my notifications. I think there was another one or two I had to follow up on. I'm planning on jumping on some more PRs this week, so I'm not going to volunteer for the Sherpa-ing, but I am going to be volunteering myself to try to take on stuff in the PR queue. So if there's, just for everyone else, core maintainers, keep an eye out for mediums and larges and extra larges, because I'll probably review it, but then I need a second review to finish that off. So, and also just a reminder for those who are new, and also any newer core maintainers, the way that works is that if it's a medium, it's up to the person who first grabs it to decides whether or not it needs a second reviewer. But after that, we always have a second review at least. And the person who initially did the review merges the code, unless it's like, let's say Fisher had opened a PR and then I review it and then someone else says Fisher merges it because he's a maintainer. But that's how that works. So I always need that second one, and then we always pass it back to the person who first did the review to do the final merge and make sure it's all there. So thought it'd be a good time to drop that in here again now that we've gotten more new people and everyone's in there. That's how our process works. So I'll be doing that this week. And then I am going to just drop this. Don't anyone get too excited. This comes with no promises or warranties implied. But I'm going to talk to Michelle about getting in touch with the CNCF people about starting to hopefully look at having a Helm Summit in the EU. So don't get too excited. Nobody blow up and announce this on Twitter. But I'm going to start trying to look on it. I'll look into that and see what we can do to set that up. Anyway, who hasn't gone? I lost track of everyone. I'm sorry.
Justin, do you want to go?
Oh, Justin, go.
Sure. Yeah, just some issue triaging for me. Been pretty busy. I thought about bringing up end-to-end tests, and maybe we could, expand what we currently have, because it seems like there's some regressions keep popping up. Maybe we could talk about that at some point. But yeah, just issue triage for me, doing some other stuff. Butcher?
This week, again, has been completely focused on Helm 3 stuff for me. After feedback from last week and a batch of feedback that came over the weekend, so there are about 12 PRs I've done. I broke the document out and everything, but the big ones are over the feedback I got about the application, our chart.yaml rewrite and the application CRD stuff. After several conversations, I decided to back out our change in format to chart.yaml, so it's back to the same format it is now, which should greatly reduce the amount of stress that both the developers and chart authors have. But what we're going to do is, instead of changing that format into a format that looks like it's competing with the application CRD format, we're just going to let the application CRD format run its course and hopefully be able to support them depending on their final format whenever they're done. So that means the chart will be even closer to the same, which means less backward compatibility logic and less learning curve for Helm 3 users. The other big thing that I've been doing this week, and Adam has been helping me out. Actually, Adam's done a lot of independent work. I wouldn't call it helping me out because he's doing better than I am. Is we've been vetting the ideas around the Lua extension model. And so we've tested different ways of generating API bindings. I think Adam's got one that's going to be a winner now because I used the Gen tool in the community project, or in the clients project, and the Lua generator for that is okay, but not great. But the short version is we have vetted the loading process, the runtime startup, and the idea that we can build Kubernetes objects in Lua. So I think we've cleared most of the obstacles. Are there any left big ones, Adam, that we have? YAML, I think we don't have a YAML decoder yet, but I think we have a workable solution.
Yeah, we might.
So
Might be good.
I think we've cleared the way to basically say Lua could be our language without any major pitfalls or oddities or inconsistencies that we've found so far. So that means from here on, we're getting closer and closer to being at a steady state for that. We've got a little bit of work on the event stuff. The repositories stuff, I'm happy that other people are working on. What was the other stuff? The event model we simplified as well this week. So instead of having two CRDs, release and release version, we are now at one CRD release, and we're back to secrets so that we can manage release versions in a way that's hopefully more attuned to security best practices in Kubernetes. So that's kind of where we are on that kind of stuff, and I'll just keep working on that this week. Is there anybody who hasn't gone yet?
I haven't gone.
Okay.
All right. This week has been a little bit of the Helm 3 stuff. When Butcher needed something reviewed, he's been throwing it at me. In addition to that, it's been some charts work. One of the things that we landed over there is now a chart can have a CI subdirectory, and in there you can have one or more values files that are specific configurations. So where a chart may have general stuff, like you don't want to pass keys in, you might want to do something like that for specific circumstances for our upstream testing. And so now we've got that working upstream. I think it was merged today. We're also adding some more stuff that people have done with better linting and vetting and validation of files, so we can more easily identify where there's a problem without having to think for ourselves. Automation. And that's been mostly it. Anybody else?
Adam, did you have anything to add on the Lua stuff? Otherwise, I'm going to pass that back over to Josh and let him.
No, not right now.
Okay. Fire away, Josh.
So I just put something up. Is that what you want me to discuss? Sorry.
Yeah, your repository. Anything you've got. The repository proposal is the main thing I thought you wanted to talk about.
Okay.
Any demo you want to do?
Yes. So I have a demo on basically Chart Museum providing multiple repos, so multi-tenancy, like Nick proposed at the summit. But also the repo stuff, I just kind of threw some stuff together like 30 minutes ago. So one of the biggest things here that I wanted to bring up in the call was authentication against a repo. So if you want to do Helm push, what are the methods for authenticating? And I was thinking about proposing a Helm login, but that kind of requires that you have some sort of token provider on the repo itself. So what I'm suggesting in the PR, which I threw in the Helm Dev channel, is if we had some sort of similar to kubeconfig, like a Helm config file, and what are the impacts of that on, are there any other type of things we would want to put there besides just repo auth? Is that the right thing to do? So any thoughts on that?
On the authentication mechanism, have we looked, so I understand probably what you're coming from with the Helm push and the Helm login side.
Right.
We're trying to model closely to the Docker login, Docker push model. Have we looked at alternative authentication methods, like different CLI UXs? So I know, for example, like Python has like, when you are pushing to the or they call it PyPI or PyPI, which is the Python package index.
Right.
Have we looked at how they do a login mechanism? Like on the push, they say if it's an authenticated backend, then you have to add your credentials here, and then you do another push, or?
I mean, I'll have to take a look. If you want to take a look at this PR and kind of just tear it apart.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, the big thing is that I didn't really want to do like username password, because that puts the requirement on a repository or Chart Museum or whatever that you need to have some sort of user database and then convert that into a token. And I don't think that's really the direction we want to go. I don't know if Nikhil has other ideas for that, but like until we have like a Docker Hub type thing, I don't think it makes sense to have Helm login.
Yeah, it might be interesting to actually take a look at, for example, OAuth or some other way to authenticate yourself as a user to Chart Museum.
Right. I'm thinking like if there is some service, they'll have a way to get that token. Maybe some sort of plugin to get it into that Helm config file or whatever we're going to call it. And then Helm just knows this is what we use. And then if we want to do like, if we want to support like S3 out of the box, we can talk about even having different schemes, like someone brought up.
Yeah. Okay, so that would take some larger discussion around the authentication and where the credentials are stored, and where they're how to authenticate against Chart Museum. Okay.
Right. And then I also had a thing for like a set context, so you could, I mean, similar to kubeconfig, right, where you are authing against a different repo if you have multiple. The one thing that this also introduces that I think Matt Farina may take issue is it's kind of removing the entire concept of a local index, and therefore when you're doing like a Helm search, you have to point at a single repo. You can't just search across multiple repos. And Matt Fisher, you brought up the idea that people may want redundancy. So this kind of doesn't address that either. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for folks who don't know, my thing with this, and I really haven't brought up my stance on it. I've been more or less trying to bring up all the stances. Is there's kind of do you do search locally or do you do search within service providers, right? If you have a bunch of services like Chart Museum and you say, okay, I'm going to query over there for search, then they know all of the things you search for, right? You now are telling them when and how you're searching for things in a public service versus something like apt where it pulls the indexes. You can search all you want and though they don't know. And so it's a difference between privacy. There's also issues of searching across everything. If I search in apt, it doesn't matter which repository I'm in. I can just search for it. Whereas if you search in this to make sure you don't do information leakage, you have to point at each one. And so if I have stable, incubator, and a private repository, I have to specify which one I'm searching against rather than just do a general search term like, Helm search MySQL and get all the MySQLs. I have to say Helm search private MySQL, Helm search stable MySQL, right? I've got to be able to specify. And so it changes the UX. And so we probably need to talk through and figure out what's our important stance on this as Helm. What does the community need? Where are the requirements to know what direction we go in? Because a bunch of providers getting together to figure out what people need may not address things like enterprise security and stuff like that.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
where my curiosity is.
I honestly, in my own workflow, I don't see a whole lot of Helm search in general because I'm typically knowing the name of the repo and the chart that I want to install. I may not know the version, so I'm doing Helm install repo name chart. So I'm interested to know like how people are using Helm search because I don't really see its place in a CI workflow. It's a nice thing to have on your laptop, but
Yeah, and so the problem that I think, Farina, you're bringing up is the ambiguity of when you do a search. Is it being sent to the right index server or is it being sent to all? And so there's the concern about leaking your intent of searching to basically every single company that you've currently added or repository that you've added to.
Yeah, so like you couldn't, if we go to API endpoints, you will always have to specify which index you're searching.
Yeah.
In order to do that, kind of the way you have to do with Docker now, right? You can't just Docker search. It's always Docker Hub unless you put Quay.io in front of it or whatever else in front of it. It'll only just search Docker Hub. You have to specify or you're out, right? And you'd have to do that same thing here. And is that okay or not? And I'm not attempting to answer the question. I'm just attempting to ask and make sure that we handle this clearly because you can't send it to everybody. That's information disclosure leakage problems.
Yeah. And I know, again, because the only other tool that I really know that's kind of like a package index that's really well done is pip, again. They actually have a pip search command, and by default, all searches occur against the default PyPy index. And for their ecosystem, they literally have probably only two indexes that are available, which is the staging index and the public index. And it's somewhat similar to our situation in where we have a public index or the stable chart repository, and then we have the incubator chart repositories. Then anything after that is internal repositories. So it might be interesting to take a look at that model as well, not just the Docker model, but other package managers if they do the search. I'm sure there's more. I'm sure there's a lot of different open source package manager repository or index tooling out there that probably has handled this or has got some historical context on this idea too.
Yeah, and some of this has to do with how we approach things. Because in the case of PyPy, and if you look at Composer and NPM, and even Docker, a lot of times you have one major hub.
Right.
And that's where everybody puts their stuff and it's hosted. Now, in the case of things like apt and Helm, we don't. Lots of people can have lots of indexes and there is no one central one. And so how do we want to go towards a central one? What does that mean?
Right.
There's a lot to think about here, but we also have a slightly different model because the community charts repo, it won't be able to hold all of the things. There's too much and the workflow doesn't scale.
Right.
One of the things I want to bring up here is in my PR I put that Helm, that the V1 index YAML and all that should still be supported. So basically, if you have an old repo that you're using with this Helm search and stuff, it should still work. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but I think V2 could become the default. But if people have requirements on these specific features, they could use it for some time.
Yeah, I think one of the things I was really interested in was making sure that during this transition between Helm 2 and Helm 3, that we could at least install Helm 2 charts. And I think one of the things that still needs to be addressed is searchability. I think that would sound pretty reasonable to be able to both handle the old V1 search methodology, as in like if we're hitting like a chart museum V1, or if we're hitting an older version of the index, and we find that it happens to be an older version of the chart repository or something, then we still retain that backwards compatibility. I think that's totally feasible.
Right. I mean, you guys have that API version in that file.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I feel like you can key off of that.
But there's also the issue that's at hand here is we're doing a lot of we think rather than going to folks and finding out what they need. And it's very easy for service providers to say, I want to offer a service in this way, but does it actually hit home with the need? Does it meet the security requirements and where a bunch of our users want to go? And I would like to get more information on that. I'm actually willing to throw a survey together, whatever, start going off to people to collect this. But I want to make sure that we actually just listen to what our users need and go in that direction.
But sometimes they may not know what they need because, like Ankush from JFrog was the one who figured out that it doesn't scale to 100,000 charts. So I don't know that many people are at that point yet. So.
Yeah, and some of it has to do with how other things parse everything. We parse a whole YAML file, convert it into JSON.
Sure.
And so part of the reason for the memory issue is actually the way we parse files versus other things like apt can do it with their stanzas and their file format. It actually creates things where you can have a more efficient memory footprint around it. And so the solutions don't always have to be obvious to this, but I want to make sure at the end of the day, there's things like security requirements that enterprises have. And I know lots of startups don't have those kinds of things thrown in their face. They're trying to quickly get things out. And I want to make sure, because a lot of enterprises use this stuff, that it meets their needs, and a lot of them, regulatory and whatever, can be different than the way we might want to sling things around normally. And I just want to make sure we don't screw something up there because we haven't thought of it.
Yeah, I don't want to assume anything.
So there was somebody who raised their hand here, and I was
Hi, that's me. So I'm new to this call. This is my first time on. I assume you guys can hear me right now since nobody else is talking.
Yeah, loud and clear.
So awesome. I showed up just to listen and learn. I'm at Red Hat, and I work on our tooling behind the service catalog and the broker automation behind that. And we're looking at Helm and starting to use some Helm. But what you're talking about now is right up my alley. The last 5 years, I spent working on repository management and basically the Swiss Army knife of Puppet modules, Python packages, Docker images, Debian packages, RPMs, all that stuff. How do you generically manage all that stuff? So I know a lot about that topic. And the one thing I did want to at least just put on the table for you guys right now to think about is there's a tremendous amount of value to be had if you can avoid requiring a service or in a live API to serve your content. If you can throw files on a static web server like an S3 bucket or just Apache or whatever, there's huge value in that. Both in reducing friction for just being able to stand up my own repository. So we've seen in communities like Python and Puppet, there's huge demand for, I want to have my own internal Puppet forge. I want to have my own internal PyPy. And, years went by and people took swaggers at it, but, for all kinds of reasons, it was not easy. There are decent solutions now for that. The other is that speaking of the enterprise use cases, in particular, those users want content on site. So even if they're using public upstream stuff, they want their own copy inside their own walls that they can guarantee is going to be available. They can audit it, they can sign it, track it, and so on. And even curate it into their own collections, in their own repositories. So anything you can do to help with that and make sure that's easy, I think will be a really good idea for the long-term health of the ecosystem.
Thanks.
Thank
That's
you.
great
Yeah,
advice.
that's very, yeah.
And if you're interested in chiming in on this, the PR, Josh, I think dropped it in a little earlier. You can drop it in again, Josh, because I don't know when Michael joins. So
Yeah, okay. Yep.
Okay, we're right at the top of the hour. Do we have anything else we want to make sure we get in today, or end on time? Okay,
I could do a 1-minute demo, but
okay. We need to elect people for the next time, and then we can do a demo for anybody who can stay around. Who wants to take my job for next time? Lead the call.
I'll lead the call next time.
Notes next time. I think I can probably just do notes next time. I'll roll off to notes. Anybody want to do issue Sherpa-ing?
I could probably do that.
All right.
Or can do that.
Okay. So that covers the main business. Anybody who wants to hang around and watch Josh's demo, we can do that. If you have to drop, we'll plan on ending after the demo, so you're not missing anything super amazing other than the demo.
shall I?
Fire away.
All right, so I'm going to make it real quick. I have this directory called charts. So in a typical chart repo today, you store all your files right next to each other. What this new layout is your ability to nest charts so that we can enable authorization on specific organizations or specific repositories in an organization. So this is an example with 9 different unique repositories nested 2 levels deep under an organization. And Chart Museum Server has added the depth flag. This multi-tenant flag is going to go away, but this depth flag, if not provided, Chart Museum will work as it is today and provide a single index YAML. If you provide a number here, it'll nest it that many times. So you could actually just do charts repo 1, 2, 3 under here if you want. So if I run this, I can now add 9 separate repos. And if you search the one, you'll see you have Kafka, which was right there. So that's the demo. That's it.
So it's basically nested chart museums in a chart museum, is my understanding.
Yeah, it's like, yo, dog, I heard you like Chart Museum.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean,
really
this is I think what Nick was asking about, and I'm just doing work now to make sure the caching is up to par with before, and then next step is authentication.
Yeah, that is very cool.
And I think that depth you could put any number there. I've only tested up to 3, but if you want to nest it,
Does it go to 99?
I might put a cap on it.
All right, that's awesome. I'm glad to see that coming in. That'll make it a lot easier for people who are running Chart Museum to be able to handle more sophisticated deployment cases, right? That's mainly what you had in mind, right, Nick? Is being able to allow teams.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, you end up having to run separate instances of Chart Museum and things like that, and being able to just make it more manageable and being able to have different teams sort of be able to get at different charts that they're dealing with is super useful.
And yeah, and the nesting will allow us to basically come up with some set of scopes similar to Docker registry. So the next step is you pass a JWT token that says you have access to these repos, and you can pull from them, you can push from them, and hopefully that will make its way into what we're talking about for Helm 3 as well.
Excellent. All right, thanks for that demo. I know we're a little bit over time, but we'll call it a meeting and see you all next week. Thanks for coming.
Have a good one, guys.